It's a big time in FDC3 at the moment, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to explain what FDC3 is, talk a little bit about FDC3 Sail, and really just explain what the new changes to FDC3 are in terms of FDC3 on the web. In order to understand FDC3, you need to understand the concept of micro frontends. Now, we're probably all used to building apps as developers, where maybe you have a few screens of HTML and the user is moving through them, and you have complete control over their user journey and also the domain model that they're using behind that application. And that is a really easily tractable problem. What gets more complicated is when you have a whole bunch of apps that you're deploying. Maybe you have a single team of people working on a whole bunch of different apps, and each app has a different purpose. And things start to get a bit more complicated then. You have to ensure that the apps are consistent between one another. And often that means building them together and having shared code between them. And that's represented by our blue circle here. But if you go one step wider, where you have multiple apps in a single organization, maybe multiple different teams in the organization, things start to get even more complicated. You can't necessarily fix a release cadence for those applications. So one app might change and another app is left behind. And this means that the applications start to need to be loosely coupled. And this is something that FDC3 really enables, that loose coupling of applications. And where this gets really extreme is where you have multiple apps and multiple organizations. So apps are provided by different data providers or different trading systems, things like this. And you start to need to have a way for all of those different apps to communicate, like a lingua franca that works across all of them. And you can't necessarily tell that particular app is going to be available on a particular day. And you don't necessarily know the version of that app that you're going to be using. So standardization becomes really key at this point. So let's talk a little bit about how FDC3 solves this problem. The idea of FDC3 is that all of this is done at runtime on the user's desktop. So let's say the user has a couple of different applications, App A and App B. And App A wants to view a chart. And maybe App A is like a list of stocks or something like that. And so it doesn't have the ability to view charts and show price change information, but there somewhere else on the desktop, there is an application that does that. So App A would raise this view chart intent, is what we call them. And there's a thing called the desktop agent, which is like a postman. And it's going to try and find somebody on the desktop that is going to handle that intent. And so it uses this resolution strategy to decide that App B would be a good place to send that intent to. And so the idea is that App A would raise the view chart intent, and then App B would resolve that view chart intent and show the charts. And so all of this is happening at runtime on the trader's desktop. So if App B is not working or gets replaced by App C, App A doesn't need to worry about that. It can just still raise that intent, and then at a later date, another app might resolve it. Another concept in FDC3 that's really important is the idea of directories. So we've talked about desktop agents, but there's also the concept of app directories. So you can load in different directories of applications into your desktop agents. And in this little diagram, I've basically got one desktop agent loading in two sets of apps in different app directories. So app 1 and app 2 are in app directory 1, and app 3 and app 4 are in app directory 2. And both of these can get loaded into the desktop agents. And obviously, these might be like little sort of ecosystems of applications. App 1 and App 2 might be quite tightly bound with each other and provide similar functionality or functionality that relies on each other. But then App 3 and App 4, they're in a different app directory. They might be provided by somebody else, some other part of the ecosystem. But together, all four of these apps can work together in FDC3, and they can all exchange intents and broadcast information to each other using the same techniques that I showed in the previous slide. So by this sort of technique, you can keep adding new app directories to your desktop agent and adding new functionality onto FDC3 and providing extra capabilities for your desktop. So FDC3 has come on quite a long journey. The original version of FDC3 was contributed to FINOS in 2017. And you can see the use case in the picture here. The idea was that we would have traders on desktops, there'd be multiple screens, and FDC3 would be the protocol by which we manage the interrelationship and the interoperability of all these apps. And the desktop agent, the container, would be handling not just message passing between these applications, but it would also do window layout and window management and security and log on and all this kind of stuff. So that was the original use case for FDC3, trying to solve this information overload problem that traders had, and also simplify and reduce the friction on the workflow between those different applications. But if we cut to 2025, we've really changed the focus on FDC3 recently, and we now have something called FDC3 on the web. And what this enables is a whole new way of working with FDC3 just in the browser. So originally, our sort of use case was big trader desktops, dedicated applications for layout. And what we've moved to is allowing all of the functionality of FDC3 to run inside a browser. And there are firms like Connectify and Interop.io who have pushed forward with this standard and built out functionality to allow them to do this. But what we found was that in enabling that kind of browser-based activity for applications, people had to introduce a proprietary library. So they had to include a Connectify FDC3 wrapper or an Interop.io FDC3 wrapper. But we wanted to maintain a way that developers could build an FDC3 enabled application and it would work in anybody's agent. So it would work across any implementation of FDC3. And so that is the standard that we've just released in FDC3 2.2. We've called it FDC3 on the web, and it allows for this discovery of the FDC3 runtime and allow different applications to interact with each other together on a web page. And as you can see, FDC3 Sail is in this diagram as well. That also supports FDC3 on the web, and it's one of the first implementations to use this standard. So I'm going to spend the rest of this presentation just demonstrating to you FDC3 Sail, which is like FINOS's very own training desktop agent. And it allows you to get the hang of FDC3 and understand what the concepts are, how it works, and how you might be able to apply it to your own application development problems. So let's get on and just demonstrate Sail working inside Google Chrome. So if I type in sail.fdc3.finos.org, you can see that Sail loads up into my browser here. And the first thing you can see is that on the left-hand side, I've got different tabs, which I can flip between, and we'll have a look at those in a minute. And then there's a plus button here. And this allows me to start applications. I'm going to try opening this trade list application here. And this is actually a demo application from our FDC3 developer course. So if you want, you can download the code for this and go and play with it, maybe add some of your own functionality. I'm going to click open here. And as you can see, it opens up the trade list application in a little window. And if I want, I can move that window around or resize it, put it where I like. So what I'm going to do is add some new stock to this. So let's try typing in AAPL for Apple. And let's have a holding of 100 of those. And so we've got two different instruments on the screen here. Now this ellipsis button here, when I click this, it's going to do that raise intent process that I showed in the diagram earlier. So I'm going to click that. And what you can see now is that it wants to send that instrument, that Apple instrument somewhere. And we have a bunch of different things that we can do with it. So we could use view charts and open like a chart for that Apple instrument, or we could view an instrument. And then again, there's different applications that can handle that. Or I might want to see some news. So I could open the Polygon Ticker News application. Or I've got a view quote and it would use this pricer application. And there's also this demo.getPrices here. So these four intents here are standard FDC3 intents. But as an app developer, you can write your own intents. You don't have to follow the naming scheme of FDC3. And if you have some other thing you want to do with this instrument, you can call it your own intent name. So let's just go with the basic option now. I'm going to view a chart. I'm going to open this trading view chart here. And as you can see, it loads up and then switches to the Apple view. So that Apple stock has now been essentially sent to this trading view chart over here on the right. So that's the first thing. So the idea is that we have this standard context data being passed from one application to another. Now, a question that we always get asked in FDC3 is, this is all very well, but I know that browsers, you can't pass things between different browser windows if they're in the different domains. But that actually isn't a problem in FDC3. There are ways, protocols within browsers that allow you to pass messages from one window to another. So essentially, we can have all sorts of things on different domains. Okay, let's try a little bit of another piece of FDC3 functionality. And I'm going to switch to a different tab for this. And I'm going to show you how broadcasting works. So I'm going to run this Sail broadcaster, and I'm going to open it here. And I'm going to have another application called Sail Receiver. I'm going to open this here. And let's just start broadcasting. So the idea of broadcast, in fact, let me open a few more applications. So I've got, as you can see, I've started 3 different receivers and I have 1 broadcaster. And these could be any applications you like. We could be using the trading view chart again. And when I broadcast in one, as you can see, this information, this sort of demo information is being sent to all of these different instances. And this allows applications to stay synchronized together. So, for example, if one application changes a view of the data, all the other applications can receive their view and catch up. And this is super useful. And let me demonstrate this again one more time. So I'm going to go back to my tab 1 again. And I'm going to close down the trading list application. And I'm going to open up a different application here. Let's open up this market trading view market data application. And we'll open it here. Actually, just to really demonstrate the point, I'm going to open this Polygon ticker news here as well. So we now have 3 applications. This one's showing Apple, this one's also showing Apple, and this one's just showing some like currency pairs. But I'm going to open up another piece of functionality called the FDC3 Workbench. And this is a really great tool, a bit like FDC3 Sail. This is a really great tool for learning about how FDC3 works. So I want to demonstrate how this works as well. I'm going to go into FDC3 Workbench, and in fact, I'm going to just swap the order of these windows around so you can see this better. And one of the things I can do here is if I click on user channels, you can see that this is saying it's on channel 1, which corresponds to my tab 1 here. And if I now go down to broadcast context, what I can do is I can say, oh, let's broadcast this Microsoft instrument. Okay. And if I broadcast that, what you see is that all of the different applications kind of catch up. So this trading view chart is now showing Microsoft stock. My ticker news is showing Microsoft as well. And in this market data window, you can see that the Microsoft ticker has now appeared in my list of things that I care about. So this broadcast has happened across all of these different applications. And at the top of the Sail control here, I can actually have a look at these different context items that have been broadcast. So I can see that the Microsoft instrument was broadcast there. And then before that, there was this chat room thing broadcast as well. So this is obviously something to do with Symphony chats. So I can sort of have a look back at the history of those and see how they work. And as you can see, the context items themselves are little bits of JSON. If you're a programmer, you'll probably understand this, which just identify what it is that's being broadcast. And this is all documented on the FDC3 website, fdc3.finos.org. There is a description and a schema for each of these different types of broadcast information. And as FDC3 developers, it's perfectly fine for you to describe new types of context information, new types, and broadcast those as well. And if you want to go really deep on this, you can also submit your different types to the FDC3 standards group and have those standardized. So if you think your context type is going to be broadly useful to the FDC3 community, then that's the way to go. And then you should hopefully see other applications picking up on that and using it. So there you go. We've looked at broadcasting and we've looked at raising intents. Let's have a look at one other thing, which is the app directory system in FDC3. So I'm going to close some of these down now and just show you this. If I click on directories here, what you can see is there are a whole bunch of different app directories loaded. So going back to that diagram I showed earlier, we had 2 app directories being shown, but here we have a whole bunch of different ones. And just to prove that this works, I'm going to turn off this Polygon directory. So this contains Polygon apps. And so if you're paying attention before, you know that there was a Polygon news app, but now that's gone, right? That doesn't appear here anymore. That app directory is no longer loaded. So if I try to raise an intent now and try to send, you can see that the view news item is missing on this list because there's nothing to receive the news intent. So in order to recover that, we're going to have to turn on our Polygon applications again. And I close that. And then if I click here again, you can see view news now appears and I can raise the news to the Polygon app. So let's just see how that works. So as you can see, some very pertinent Tesla news coming up on the screen here now. So you can also add your own app directories. So if you just scroll to the end of this list, you are free to add a new directory, my new directory. And here you can simply put in the URL of your app directory here. And once you click the tick button here, it will start using that app directory as well, and it will load those up. The schema, so these are JSON files again, and the schema for these is also on the FDC3 website. It's quite simple to add new apps to an app directory. You just have to host them somewhere on the internet, and then it can download that list of apps. You can also add new apps to Sail without an app directory entry as well. If I click on custom apps here, then as you can see, I've created a second version of the Workbench here. So Workbench 2, and I've just put in a URL for the Workbench. And I can add new apps as well. So I might want to say my crazy news app, and you can put a description in here and a URL in here. And I might want to say this responds to view news. And maybe instead of instruments, it responds to FDC3.product, something like that. And you can describe the intents that your app supports here. And yeah, and again, you can click a new app, and you can have as many of these as you like, basically. So a final piece of functionality that exists in FDC3 Sail, and we've kind of looked at this a little bit already, is these different tabs. So if you want, you can define new tabs. So if I go into the tab screen here, it comes with these three built in, 1, 2, and 3, but I can add another one. So Rob's new tab. And I can change the icon of that if I want to, and the color. So I might want a nice light blue color here. And you can move things between apps in FDC3. So I can take this, I can put it in here, and it'll move onto this screen. And I can, of course, start intents on that tab, or I can start them on another tab. So I can click on one and load the TradingView chart on there. Or I can actually press new tab and it'll load into a browser tab. Let's try that. If I click on new TradingView chart, as you can see, it's actually loaded into an entirely new browser tab now. So I think that's a nice little tour of some of the way FDC3 Sail works. Hopefully this has given you a good idea of what FDC3 is for and how that hangs together. And we've covered the concepts of broadcasting, and we've covered the concepts of raising intents, which are two key FDC3 topics. And what we've also looked at is contexts and how contexts are defined, and how Sail allows you to see the contents of the contexts as they're passing around the system. So the idea of Sail is to be a learning tool. Hopefully you can take this and you can embed your own applications into it and test them out. And in the next part of this training tutorial, we're actually going to cover exactly how to do that. So I will take you through the process of writing some JavaScript code and adding it into Sail and showing you how you can build applications that both broadcast contexts and listen to intents and have all the functionality of FDC3 that you can see in these applications here that I've shown you today.